All right, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good day today. We're going to do an old-fashioned tent showdown. So if you've watched, I have another one on here that's comparing the REI Quarterdome SL1, the Gossamer Gear the One, and the Durston X-mid one-person tent, which has almost like 20,000 views, which is awesome. But when I did that video, I thought, the whole reason behind that video was sometimes it's hard to find videos of somebody who's taller. Now I'm almost 6'2", in some of these ultralight one-person shelters. So I thought I might as well get them out and try them out, which really led to me buying the Durston X-mid one-person tent, which I really like. But there's a newcomer in this challenge, same price range, that I was able to get my hands on. Thank you to a nice guy in one of these Facebook groups that I'm in, actually sent me the tent to test. It's already been posted if you haven't seen it. I did a review of the tent. I'll put it in the description here, along with a link to the video that was my original tent comparison. But the Outdoor Vitals Fortius one-person trekking pole tent. So got it out, set it up, tested it out with some gear in it, did a little first thoughts kind of review of it, and I really like that tent. So I thought it'd be fun to compare it to what is seemingly the #1 single person shelter in the backpacking world right now, the Durston X-mid one-person tent. So I've got them both set up over here. So in a minute we will head over there and take a look at these, but I got a regular Thermarest sleeping pad I'll put in there with my pillow, put myself in there so you can see how I fit, talk about what I like about these tents, and talk about maybe what I don't like, and then give my kind of final thoughts on why you would choose one over the other. So nothing super long-winded, nothing super detailed about these tents. I have reviews now of both of them on the channel if you want something like that, or I'll just link the manufacturer's sites in the description too so you can get exact specs. But just first off, both these tents are sub $300. Both of them are actually right around $250, $260. Outdoor Vitals has a program through their Live Ultralight membership that you can sign up for. It's $10 a month, and you get discounts on anything you buy through them. Plus that $10 you pay a month just goes into an account that you turn around and use at their store anyway. So it's pretty awesome. But that makes the Fortius one-person tent, I think, around $270, $260, something like that. The Durston X-mid one-person, this is just the regular, this isn't the solid, and it's not the pro. I'll save that for a different review. I think it's right around that $250, $260 range. So both really the same price. Both of them are 2 trekking pole tents. You need 2 poles for each one. So they're not freestanding tents. Both of them are lightweight. The Durston X-mid tent comes in at just under 30 ounces with the stakes, but it is double wall. So that's pretty good for a double wall one-person tent. And the Outdoor Vitals Fortius one-person with the stakes and lines comes in just under 26 ounces. So it is the lighter weight option. It does pack a little smaller. When I tear them down, I'll show pack size too. But the difference is, the Outdoor Vitals tent is a single wall, the Durston tent is a double wall. So the big thing there is obviously condensation. In a double wall tent like the Durston tent, you don't really have to worry about it as much because you have the inner bug netting that you're inside, so you're really not touching the fly material. The Outdoor Vitals Fortius tent is a single wall tent, so the roof panels are the fly, so there is some condensation. But that tent has very, very good ventilation on it, so I think it would be limited, but that is something to be aware of. It's really not that big of a deal. You take a you take like a ShamWow or a pack towel, wipe it down, and you've got no issues. It dries really quick. That's just kind of the overview of them. So first we're going to go over to the Outdoor Vitals Fortius tent. I'm going to climb in there and I'll talk about what I like about it, show you how I fit in it, and then we'll move on to the Durston. Okay, so right now I'm sitting in the Outdoor Vitals Fortius tent, and I can tell you right off, plenty of space in here. Sorry, let me take this hood off. Plenty of space in here. I'm sitting on my Thermarest Uberlight pad, so 2.5 inch thick 2.5 inch thick pad, and I'm not even in the middle, and I still have plenty of space. If I move to the middle, I mean, I'm reaching almost all the way up to touch the roof. So you have plenty of headroom in here. You've got really good ventilation because this whole back wall is mesh too, and you have the little awning back there to protect it from rain. The bathtub is a little higher. You know, I talked about a lot of this in the review I did, but just overall space in here is fantastic. It is just a single entry tent, so just the door on the one side, but you've got a huge vestibule over here. Like you can kind of see, but there's a ton of space over here to fit a pack, your shoes, all that. Obviously this closes down, plenty of space. Like I can't reach anywhere near where the zipper would be on this. So it tells you a lot about the space in the vestibule. To get in and out, I'd kind of have to climb out there a little ways to get to it, but I'll sacrifice that for vestibule space pretty much any day. It is a two-way zipper, so when you do have this closed, you can unzip it a little bit up here to allow a little more ventilation if you need to, but I would just probably have it open. You do have the ability to unclip the other door from the line here and tie that back too, so this whole thing is wide open. But plenty of space. I'll take my shoes off and show you, because this isn't my tent, so I'm not going to be climbing it with my shoes on. But again, 6'2", I'm on my pad. I'm all the way up on a pillow. My feet still have plenty of space before they hit, like they're stacked on top of each other on my pad. I think you can see that. And I've still got space before I would contact that. And I could do a better job too of pitching this tent. It's on a slope, but plenty of headroom. I can sit up, no fear of brushing the roof. And that's what I was talking about there. It is a single wall tent, but because this is all mesh on both sides of you, there's not that risk of like some of the one pole that are more of like almost like a pyramid. This whole back wall, if you bump it, if there's condensation, you're getting it on yourself. Here it's just the roof basically, so at the head and the foot. But you've got mesh ventilation all along down there too, so if this does collect condensation, it'll roll down, hit that mesh, and go out, no big deal. Do you run the risk of touching it in the middle of the night? Yeah, and that's just something with a single wall tent. But as far as single wall tents go, the ventilation in this is awesome. If you watched my little review of it, I would put the ventilation on this one well above the Gossamer Gear the One's ventilation. Material wise, it is sil nylon. It's a 15D sil nylon, so it's a little bit heavier, and that's what they were going for with this tent, is to make it very lightweight but very storm worthy. Like that is a concern of mine with the Gossamer Gear the One, is it's not the best in the wind and in the rain, and it sags really bad and it blows around like a wind sail, which this is still sil nylon, so that it can still stretch, but it is a little heavier, so it'll hold up to it a little bit better. But the design of it, the pole at the front is taller than the pole at the back, so it gives it like a semi-pyramid shape, so it'll shed wind better. And the guys at Outdoor Vitals, like I said, they test these tents. There's videos of them with these doing the entire Uinta Highline Trail in snow and rain, deserts, the Appalachian Trail. Like, they have tested this tent, and it works very well. But as far as usability and our comparison, very roomy, easy to spend time in this tent with no issues. You know, anytime I can freely sit up and down in a tent without brushing, I'm happy with it for sure. Plenty of space out here to cook, store gear. There's room inside here at the foot end and the head end for me to keep stuff. it's just a very comfortable tent. It is also worth mentioning, there is technically no head end or foot end on this tent because they're the same width at both ends. So, like in this situation, I technically set it up to have my head at this end because I like having it right by the door. But when I got in here and realized the slope was going this way, I would never want to sleep that way. Some tents, you're tearing it down and flipping it around. This one, that's the same width at both ends, so you can just turn around. No big deal there. It does just have the one door. It's a one-person tent, so it's not that big of a deal, but you will see in the Durston tent how that does come in handy. Not really any room, and you can't get to anything out here. I guess, you know, I could keep my shoes over there, my hiking shoes, because I typically have my Crocs that I'll wear as camp shoes. So I could keep these over there and then have my Crocs out here. But overall, I do really like this tent, and I think this is a solid design and a very well thought out tent. I fit, you know, there's no issues with that. It's not I don't feel like I'm in a coffin at all. It is a very roomy one-person tent. So now, let me climb out, let me move the sleeping pad over to the Durston, and I'll show you what that's like. Okay, so now we're in the Durston tent, and you know, this tent is probably one of the most popular one-person trekking pole tents that you can possibly get right now, for multiple reasons. One, it's very easy to set up. 4 stakes, 2 poles, and you're done. Very easy. I do have the extra stakes to give it the vestibule shape, but you get a ton of storage space outside the tent under the fly. There's a whole vestibule here, obviously where this closes. So what's nice is you can have, you know, your shoes, all your cooking stuff on one side, and then you actually have 2 doors. I have a whole nother area out here with a whole nother vestibule where I can put my pack and whatever else over there. So that is nice. As far as protected space, you have a ton in this tent. You know, space to lay down. It's kind of, the tent goes kind of at an angle inside here, but I have plenty of space to lay down because of the shape and the vertical walls. You know, you're really never, even the bug net, you're really not touching it, and obviously it's a double wall, so I'm not ever going to come in contact with the fly, so I don't have to worry about condensation getting on me or on my bag or anything like that. I can sit up on my pad pretty much anywhere in the tent, and other than trying to duck to see the camera, but just general headroom, I'm fine. Now, I will say, after being in that tent and then climbing in this, and it's the same with the Gossamer Gear tent or this one, because of the bug netting in here, the bug netting is pretty good size, but it's still small. It's a one-person tent. I definitely feel more closed in this tent than I do in that one. I've used this on trips, and it's perfectly fine for laying in and cooking and hanging out. And it's not like, you know, if I touch the back, when I touch, it's just the bug netting. And the angles that are in here, like, you can lay where you're really not even touching it. But to just the overall feel, you definitely notice that it's smaller in here. So that is one thing about the Durston X-mid that really nobody talks about. But I do see some people complain about it. The one person is pretty small in this bug net. So if I was in here and had to hang out in here for a long time, it would get kind of claustrophobic. It's hard to describe. Like, I'm fine with one-person tents, but if I had my choice, that has a little more space in it. But as far as just the positives in here, you have a ton. From the watertight zippers out here, so there's no, like, that extra, just the like rain guard like that tent has, or a lot of tents have, that constantly get caught. It's just a watertight zipper. You don't have to worry about it. Magnets for the door to flip back, super easy to use. This material is a sil poly instead of a sil nylon. So the positive of the sil poly is it doesn't stretch when it gets wet. So I've had this in some rain and wind. There's no stretching. There's no reason to have to go out and retighten guy lines. It takes care of itself, no problems. It's still very durable. The design of it, the shape of it, it's almost like a pyramid tent, but because the poles are offset, it gives you more space. But it sheds wind very, very well. It sheds rain this is a very weather worthy tent. This has kind of become this is my winter tent. I've had it in snow, very cold temperatures, wind and stuff, and it's great. It sheds the snow really well. There's a lot of videos of this tent using it in the UK, and their winds are even worse than ours, and it does a fantastic job. Because it's a double wall, you do have the ability to take the inner out. So you could, if it just was soaked on the outside, you can take the outer fly completely off, store the bug netting, the inner inside your pack, and this outside to dry out. With the single wall tents like the Fortius, you can't do that, but you can just stuff it on the outside of your pack and let it dry out throughout the day. Sunny afternoon, let it air out. So it does have that capability. But overall, I mean, there's a reason this tent's so popular. It's built very well. It can handle basically any scenario. Like even right now, for ventilation purposes, obviously you have good ventilation because this is all mesh, but I could also just open the other door and tie it back, and you just have a complete cross breeze. So in really good weather, that's a big plus. And then you'd still have two basically very protected vestibule areas. I could tuck things too if I needed to. So just a really awesome tent. Plenty of space still down at the foot and the head on the diagonals to store gear. You know, I could shove a jacket up here. I got plenty of room down at my feet to shove other things. You know, I showed it, but I fit with plenty of room to spare. A long wide pad fits in here with no problems. You still have some space around you. So it is an awesome one-person tent for sure. If I'm comparing them, you know, like I said, it does feel a little roomier in the Outdoor Vitals tent. Just being honest. So that's kind of comparing them on the setup. And you can see what I'm talking about. Down at the foot, plenty of space down there, and then there's the whole second vestibule over there. So just a really well thought out and designed tent. So I'm gonna climb out, tear these down, pack them back up, show you their pack sizes, and then just kind of give you my final thoughts on what I think of each tent, positives and negatives, and which one I would suggest. All right, so got the tents torn down. Here's the pack size comparison. This is the X-mid one person. This is the Outdoor Vitals Fortius one person. So, I mean, they're pretty close. The X-mid, as expected, it's a little bit bigger. I mean, it is a double wall. You know, this one being sil nylon, you can smash that down to basically nothing. So what are my thoughts? What does all this mean? So the point of this video was really not meant to be like a big in-depth review of either one of them. It was really just what I always try to look at when I've looked at tents is what's the usability like? Like, how am I gonna fit? That's always my biggest concern. I've bought enough tents over the years that I think look great, all the specs and pictures and some in-depth like review videos. But then I get it and I try to get in it and I realize I don't like it for one reason or another from a usability standpoint. So that was really the whole point with this. You know, same as my last tent comparison. Nothing crazy in depth, but just what I see when I use them, what I like, what I don't like. So both tents perfectly fine for someone 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". I think, honestly, despite what the manufacturers may say, sorry, I'm trying to cover my sunburn on my neck, 6'4", 6'5", and up, I think would have a tough time in either one of these tents. I'd give the edge on that, I guess, to the X-mid. You're going to be right up against the mesh the whole time, but at least you won't be touching the outer fly. The Outdoor Vitals one, again, the pitch wasn't perfect, but I think you'd be rubbing. As far as the Outdoor Vitals Fortius, I really good tent. You know, I wanted to get my hands on it. I've tested a few of their pieces for packs, jackets, things that sun hoodie. That's what this is, and it's all been great. And that tent really is no different. That is a one-person trekking pole tent that weighs 26 ounces. Seems pretty weather resistant. It's definitely big enough on the inside. It feels spacious because of its design with the two poles, but because of the shape, it'll handle some wind. It's still sil nylon. Sil nylon, you're always going to have a little bit of stretching when it gets wet, so you just have to retension some guy lines. Not a huge deal, but that one being a little bit heavier, the 15 denier versus some of the lighter weight ones that other companies use, I'd feel pretty confident with that in a storm. I love the ventilation. I love all the mesh. Zippers are smooth. It's got really long guy lines, so if you need to stake it out in different ways, it's very flexible. Packs down to nothing. It's a solid tent for the money. Really the only negatives I'd have about it, it's a little more finicky to set up with the poles at two different heights, but it just takes some playing around with and you can get it. Of course, you'll have to deal with the sagging of a sil nylon tent. It's just part of it with them. And obviously it's single wall, so there is some condensation. I don't own it, so I can't get it out and test it. Just comparing it to my Gossamer Gear, the one, I don't have a ton of issue with condensation in that tent. I mean, it gets some, but nothing terrible. That one seems like it has way more ventilation, so I feel like it would be even better. And there's plenty of videos of these guys using that tent from Outdoor Vitals and it's surviving whatever they throw at it. So it's probably fine. The Durston X-mid, just a fantastic all-around tent. Super easy to set up. Once you figure it out, it's up in a minute. You know, if it's driving rain, I know I can get that X-mid up pretty quick. Its weather resistance is probably one of the best just because of its design. I would give it the edge on weather resistance, especially wind, snow loading, just because of its shape. It's basically a pyramid. Snow is just going to fall off of it. It's going to shed wind very well. The material being the sil poly, you don't have to worry about stretching. I've heard people say things that sil poly is not as durable as sil nylon. I can't tell you. I haven't owned this tent long enough, but I would think it wouldn't be as popular and there wouldn't be more manufacturers starting to use it if that was the case. I mean, it's just not the lightest material, you know, but it's okay. It still works fine, and it only weighs 30 ounces. The negatives for the Durston X-mid, it is for a one-person tent. It's a big footprint. You know, what gives you that flexibility of the 2 doors and 2 vestibules, and a lot of the positives and the shape of it does come with that issue. It's pretty big, and I've seen people complain even with like their one-person. It's harder to fit it in tight spots. It's definitely a bigger footprint than the Fortius tent. I've never found a campsite where I think it would be an issue, because it's basically the same footprint as most smaller 2-person backpacking tents, which are basically just a 1-person anyway. But as far as the overall footprint, so yeah, have there been some times over the years I've camped in my 1-person tents where I wouldn't have been able to put the X-mid? Probably. But I could have found a spot right in the same area and probably been okay. So that's probably not too big of a concern, but it is worth pointing out. It is heavier, so if you're going for the absolute lightest weight thing you can find, well, for one, you're probably looking at Dyneema tents versus materials like these. But if you're on a budget and you're trying to find the absolute lightest weight tent, the Fortius wins that battle. It is lighter. It is what it is. The X-mid is double wall, so again, you don't have to worry about the condensation, but that is something, you know, using that tent, being in that tent, and then getting in a different one person that is a single wall that's bigger, you do really feel the confined space, at least at my size, of the one person's bug net. Now, my understanding is the Pro is just more of a single wall, so you lose a lot of that, so it is bigger on the inside. I actually have a buddy that got their hands on one, so there'll be a comparison with that and my tarp tent dipole coming up soon too. But for the sake of this, that tent is more cramped on the inside. You definitely have more storage space outside, which is why I don't think to me it's never really felt super cramped, because I can keep all of my gear somewhere on the outside for the most part. I don't have a bunch of stuff inside with me. But if I had to spend a day hanging out in that tent and had to have the bug nets closed and everything closed down, you're gonna feel more claustrophobic in the X-mid than that Fortius tent. It's just reality. And some people that might bother. You know, me personally, my trip coming up this summer, my 100-mile trip I'm doing on the Superior Hiking Trail, we're gonna be out there at the height of bug season. So I imagine there's gonna be quite a few nights at camp that we're pretty much just gonna hide in the tent. That is really the reason I didn't want to take the X-mid. It's so small inside that bug net, I was just afraid I'd go nuts. So that caused me to go for a different tent for that. But other than that, there's really no negatives with that tent. It's a fantastic tent. Both of them are fantastic tents. I guess for me, if I had to pick one, if I could only have one tent, which is a horrible, sad thought. A horrible, sad thought. Probably even for a lot of people watching this video. If I had to just pick one, I'd pick the X-mid. It's kind of that jack of all trades tent. I can use it in nice weather like this. I can just open both doors, get an amazing breeze. Yeah, the bug netting's a little small, but then it's open all the way around, and it wouldn't feel as bad. Yes, it's a little bit heavier, but if I can only have one tent, it's got the durability for bad weather. I would have no worries taking that tent out in 40, 50 mile an hour winds. I'd have no worries taking that tent out in snow. That tent can do it all. You can adjust the pole heights. The design of it will allow for that. So if I need to, like when I went, the video on here with my buddy Steve, and we went and it got down to single digits, I took the X-mid and I just didn't put the poles as high, and I cinched the lines down so it was pretty much on the ground to keep any drafts from coming in, and it worked fine. Or you can jack the poles up more and loosen the guy lines a little and get some airflow underneath it. It does that too. If you're not as worried about that and you're looking for an option to save weight, maybe you've got a winter tent that you know, like, I'm not worried about that. I've got a tent for that. I'm just looking for something that I can lighten the load, multi-day trips, very lightweight tent, but I don't want to break the bank. But I also want to make sure I feel confident that when I get caught in a storm, it's not going to let me down. The Fortius tent, I have every belief would do that. It's roomy enough that it's comfortable, but it's not overly roomy that you're just wasting weight, I guess. They really did a good job on striking that balance between ultralight but still usable. It's kind of hard to ultimately compare them because they're two different tents. One's double wall and one's single wall. Hopefully that helped you a little bit. Hopefully you got something out of this video. I always appreciated videos like this with the ability to get my hands on that tent for the review. That was the main reason of doing it. But I know how people love this X-mid tent, and I thought, well, let's compare the Fortius to what would probably be the reigning champ right now in one-person tents. They're both in the same price range. They're around the same weight, kind of the same style. So that's a look at comparing the two. Please, if you have any comments towards this, drop them down there below. If you have any questions, comment below. Hopefully you like the video. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe. I'm knocking on the door of 1,000. Maybe by the time I post this, I'll be at 1,000. Who knows? But plenty more videos coming. We're getting into the heart of backpacking season around here now. We got a lot of fun trips planned, more gear reviews. The next one will be the battle of the tent again, between the Tarp Tent Dipole and the X-mid one-person pro. So that should be fun. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day.